other thing that I want to ask you around is the kind of the contract stuff. So obviously one thing that people may have seen got some press at the time was the work you did with Kevin De Bruyne and around his contract negotiations. I don't know how much you can say specifically about that one, but maybe you've got some examples that you can, share a little bit about how does that kind of work come about? Are you kind of working with a player? Are you working with the agent? And what kind of stuff are you actually looking at, Jeremy, to do a project like that?
Yeah, sure. That was a really fun one, actually. We did. I'd love to say that we sat in a room, kind of brainstormed this great idea of working, doing data analytics directly with players. And it really fell in our lap, which was great. So we got recommended by a friend of ours that was working in Belgium. He was working at Ghent, David Smulders, who's again, was really, really good scout. Put us in touch with the lawyer of Kevin. He contacted us and said, "Look, Kevin would like this information. He'd like to know about this." And yeah, and we thought, well, okay, this is quite a cool project. Let's do it. Didn't really think that much of it, if we're honest. We kind of did the project, gave it back to them, presented back, and then about a couple of months later, maybe even 3 or 4 months later, we see that it's all gone. It's gone global. Basically, the media are all over it, and the kind of headline is, De Bruyne negotiates contract without agent with data.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, well, that was us, wasn't it? That was us. So I phoned the lawyer and I'm like, was that what you used? And he was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, are we allowed to talk about it? And he said, yeah, of course, yeah. Obviously, can't give all the details of the report, but yeah, of course, talk about it. And suddenly that blew up. And since then, we've done projects with. I mean, some of the ones we're allowed to talk about. So you got Hector Bellerin with his move from Arsenal to Betis, with Alex Greenwood and her contract negotiation at Man City. We've done projects with England captains. We've done projects with Chelsea players, with Inter Milan players, with French internationals, German internationals, all sorts of stuff. So it's been, it's really kind of been clear that from a player perspective, this was needed and wanted. Um, in Kevin's case, it was a funny one because obviously it was his lawyers that approached us, but that's because the agent was out of the picture.
Mm.
I say out of the picture. I think he went to prison. So I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure that was what happened. So that was one where he needed that support kind of ASAP. Since then, we've been approached by all sorts. We get approached by players directly, which is fine. We get approached by agents themselves to support their clients. We get approached by lawyers. We get approached by the fathers of players. That's been a really interesting one. Got approached by 5 or 6, Premier League fathers who want to support their sons' development as players. And then sometimes it's marketing companies, Puma and Adidas we've worked with. So you kind of it's from lots of different angles, and lots of different reasons. And I think that's the bit. So with De Bruyne, um, there was quite a specific kind of set of questions,
Mm.
which was around how do I how do I maximize my career, basically? And we always try and start with the sporting question. So the sporting question was, who's the best team for me to go and win the Champions League? So how do
Mm.
I win the Champions League? Is Man City the best team for me to be with? Are there other options? And then we start to build models around that to try and answer some of those questions. So we can start to forecast, if you stay here, what's the chances of you winning the Champions League? If you stay here, what's the chance of you winning the Premier League? What happens if you move to this club? Can we start to forecast what the likely probabilities are for you to be winning stuff? And then also you then start to work backwards as to how's this negotiation going to happen? Like what are Man City going to say?
Mm.
Um, so they might, for example, say, yeah, I accept that, we've got a better chance of winning the Champions League with Kevin than without. But of course, if Kevin left, we would replace him with a player of an equal,
Mm.
level. At which point you can then move on to different questions about, well, yeah, but how much is that going to cost you?
Mm.
What was Kevin's value at that time? X hundreds of millions to replace him, plus signing bonuses, plus all the other things that go with it. And of course, Kevin's not going to leave and move anywhere. He's going to move to one of your rivals.
Mm.
So their chances of winning the Champions League are now going to go up even further, as opposed to. So you can start to kind of layer on top the financial element on top of the performance element, because that's the bit that actually has value when it comes to negotiating a contract with a club. like you can go into a room with Pep and talk about the on-pitch stuff if you really want,
Mm.
but that's not going to be a very fruitful discussion about contract. They already know he's a good player. He goes into the room and says, "Oh, look, here's my XG shot map." Well, yeah, okay, great, but we already know you're a top player. It doesn't have a lot of value. Whereas if you start to layer on top, benchmarking against other players, looking at, well, if I sign, then you have X% more chance of winning this. This has X amount of prize money attached to it. All these kind of things are um, a lot more kind of beneficial in that negotiation phase.